Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
It had many more countdowns. I'd have had to go pee again. My name's Tom Brady, Jr. I'm an alcoholic. Haven't had a drink since July 20th, 1965. And like Eli said, I provided the willingness. That's about all I had left. I'm taking this coat off. It's hot up here.
Take it all off.
Page 69, sweetheart. I attended Al-Anon this afternoon. You believe that? And I heard all the propaganda. Actually, I have a deep affection and admiration and respect for the Fellowship of Al-Anon. I mean that. There are a couple ladies at home without whom I would have been in a bad way when it came to matters of dealing with a couple of my kids. And they've helped me a lot. And I have a habit. If I like you, I pick at you. And so I like to pick at Al-Anon. I heard June this afternoon, but it just took me when she said that the big book sings to her soul. Isn't that something? Thought, wow, you know. And then she started quoting a few places, you know, and it does. And it sings a beautiful song, doesn't it? The song of sobriety and recovery, responsibility, love, and these transformations that we've seen here. We're going to see one in Frank. We're going to see one in a lot of those people who stood up tonight. And only God can bring about that kind of a transformation. It's a change in character. It's a person whose human nature cannot be changed, they like to say. And if that be true, I've been living a very unnatural way of life for almost 31 years. And I like it. And I have a good time with it. Got to tell my Al-Anon story. Seems this alcoholic and his wife, Al-Anon wife, and kids were riding through the country one night and they ran out of gas. They went to a farmer's house and he said, well, I can put you up. He said, but somebody's going to have to sleep in the barn. I only have 2 beds. And the kids said, oh, let us sleep in the barn. And they went out to the barn, you know, and 15 minutes later they came back. They said, we can't sleep out there. The animals are bothering us. And the alcoholic says, well, I'll go out to the barn. He goes out to the barn to sleep. 15 minutes later he comes in the house. He said, I can't sleep. Those animals are very noisy out there. They bother me. And the Al-Anon says, oh, I'll go. And she goes out to the barn, and 15 minutes later, the animals came in. I don't know if you all have noticed it in Nevada, but victimhood has become a growth industry. Have you noticed that? Every other person you meet is a victim. You know, I was one for years. It's strange. You know, some of these people feel like if they hold on to the blame, it's like a life preserver. And it's not. It's like an anvil around their neck. And it's going to drown them in a sea of self-pity. You know? And there's a key to that. It's the queen of the virtues. And I learned it in here, and it's called forgiveness. And forgiveness doesn't mean to like the person who wronged you or understand why the person did that. Forgiveness means I release you and I release myself. And I'd like to see some of these people who are victims practice that virtue of forgiveness. I knew it would get around alcoholism sooner or later, and I heard a guy over in North Carolina say that alcoholics are victims of narcissistic wounding. And what they need is self-esteem. Well, maybe so. I don't know if anybody ever wounded my Narcissus. I know it would have pissed me off if they had. You know? And I didn't come here to get self-esteem. I came here to survive. And they told me that one of the keys to my survival was I had to stop being a victim and take responsibility for my life and accountability for my behavior and get out of the blame game. And God knows I know they're victims, and my heart goes out to you. But I also say you're going to remain a victim till the day you die until you forgive. That's a flat get it. One of my favorite bands is the Eagles. And they got a new album out called Hell Freezes Over. And there's a song in that album about victimhood. Okay? It says, I turn on the tube and what do I see? A whole lot of people crying, don't blame me. They point their crooked little fingers at everybody else, spend all the time feeling sorry for themselves. Victim of this, victim of that. Your mama's too thin, your daddy's too fat. Get over it. All this whining and crying and pitching a fit, get over it. It's like going to confession every time I hear you speak. You're making the most of your losing streak. Some call it sick, but I call it weak. You drag it around like a ball and chain. You wallow into guilt, you wallow into pain. You wave it like a flag, you wear it like a crown. Got your mind in the gutter, bringing everybody down. Bitch about the present and blame it on the past. I'd like to find your inner child and kick its little ass. Get over it. I really came out here to simplify things for you people. I had an outstanding experience last month on the 7th of February. I was invited by this couple who are friends of mine to witness the birth of their baby. And it was one of the high points of my entire life. It was just, I can't describe it. And you see this little fella coming out and you see that little face and those little eyes blinking for the first time, and I thought to myself, that kid doesn't know how much he knows already. How much he's coming into this world with as a part of his makeup. And one of the things he knows now, but he doesn't know he knows it, is where to turn in times of trouble and who to turn to. It's a part of our makeup, according to a book I read one time. You know? And I had that. This is not the kind of knowledge that we learn. This is the kind of knowledge that is inborn. A priori, as the philosophers would say, intuitive knowledge. It's the kind that the program is designed to uncover. The program uncovers, if you will, what I already knew when I was a little boy. Don't believe me? When I was a little kid, I knew when I was beyond my limits. When things were not in my control, I knew it. And I also knew the second thing. If I'd go get somebody bigger than me, the problem might be solved. And I'd go get somebody bigger, and guess what? I go get my big sister Carolyn or my mama or my daddy, you know, or a big friend, and the problem would be solved. You know, I knew that when I was a kid. And I knew it when I was a drunk, too. Every time I was really sick, I knew where to turn in times of trouble, didn't you? How many of you played the litany? Oh, God. Now, think about the last time something terrible happened to you. Things were out of control. Did you say something to the equivalent of God, God, please, oh, God, please help me, something like that? How'd you know that? Did you think about that a lot? I don't think so. I had a friend when I was a kid. He's the dirtiest kid I ever knew in my life. His name was Ronnie. You could smell him coming 2 blocks away. Ronnie was a good baseball player. We put him on shortstop, say, play deep, Ronnie, play real deep. Ronnie pulled boogers out of his nose, rub them in his hair, and twist his hair all over his head. Now, I liked Ronnie. I was scared of him. I don't know if it was the smell, but I was always scared of him. And his mom and daddy were street drunks. He didn't have anybody to take care of him. And I'd take him home with me sometime. And Mother would meet us on the front porch with 2 tubs, one for Ronnie and one for his clothes. And he'd stay with us for a while. And he absolutely adored my mom and dad, you know. I could beat Ronnie at 2 things. I could outrun him, which was good because I was scared of him. And I could beat him shooting marbles. Any of you guys remember shooting marbles? And I'd shoot marbles. The rules were simple. You win, you get all the marbles. And I'd beat Ronnie shooting marbles, and Ronnie'd take my marbles. Now, I knew that wasn't right, but I was afraid of Ronnie. If I knew what to do, I'd go home and get my daddy. And I'd say, Daddy, Ronnie got my marbles again. He said, you win, son? I'd say, yes, sir. Well, that's not right. Let's go get them. And I think Ronnie stole my marbles just to get to see my daddy. Because we'd go over there and he'd say, son, did you get Tommy's marbles again? He'd say, yes, sir. Did you win? No, sir. That's not right. Give them back. Okay. Now, next time you sit around getting profound and philosophical about the first 3 steps, let me explain them to you. First step says out loud, I have lost my marbles. And I can't get them back. But I believe somebody bigger than me can get my marbles back. And you go to that bigger one and turn the situation over, and lo and behold, you get your marbles back. And that's what blows the minds of so many people. This program is so simple, you know. Intellectuals don't understand this program. You know that your real low bottom's an intellectual. You got to get him to stop thinking before anything else. This is not a thinking program. One great spiritual teacher said one time, which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit to his stature? Amen. It's not a feeling-based program either. Feelings come and feelings go and feelings changed. It's a spiritual program. Every spiritual program on the face of God's earth is action-based. No matter what I think, no matter how I feel, there's certain things I've got to do if I want to be transformed. If I want to change, I got to get out there and do it, regardless of my thoughts and my feelings. And intellectuals don't understand that. You know, they pick up the book Alcoholics Anonymous. Journal of the American Medical Association reviewed this book in 1939. You know, the reviewer found, quote, absolutely nothing of redeeming value in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, end of quote. Intellectual will be talking to me and said, you must be an awfully strong person to have been sober so long. I said, no, sir. As a matter of fact, it was when I accepted my weakness that I started getting well. And he'd say, that doesn't make any sense. I'd say, I know it. You must have fought awfully hard to win the victory over alcohol. No, sir. As a matter of fact, I surrendered. And he says, that makes no sense. I said, I know it doesn't. Well, what do you do to stay sober? Well, I go to meetings. Oh, group therapy. No, sir, just a bunch of drunks get together and talk, you know. We lie quite often. And he says, that makes no sense. I said, no, it doesn't. What else do you do? I got this sponsor. Oh, a psychotherapist. No, sir, he's a plumber. He says, that makes no sense. I said, no, it doesn't. Well, what else do you do? We got this 12-step program. Aha! The great metaphysicians and theologians and philosophers and psychologists got together and laid you out a program. No, sir, it was put together by a bunch of drunks. He said, that makes any sense. I said, no, it doesn't. He said, who founded this outfit? I said, a bankrupt stockbroker and a proctologist who had lost his ass. And he said, that makes no sense. I said, no, it doesn't. You know? He said, well, how's it work? I said, real good so far. See, people never will seem to get the idea that, isn't it poetic that people like me were designated by God to give the message to me? You know, and people overlook the fact that God's often chosen strange messengers to carry His words. You know that? Y'all remember Ezekiel? Let me tell you about Ezekiel out walking around in a valley of dry bones. Visualize this. And them bones got up and started dancing, man. And he looked up in the sky and there's a wheel inside a wheel way up in the middle of the air. I think Ezekiel was in DTs. Said, better go get Ezekiel. He's been in the Mogan David again, you know. Elijah run naked in the desert, man. Never combed his hair, never cut his hair, his beard, or anything else. Didn't wear clothes. Ate grasshoppers. That's a weirdo. God chose him. Huh? How about Moses? The Bible says Moses was slow of speech. That meant Moses stuttered. I'd have stuttered too if a big voice had called me up on a mountain. And I said, who are you? And he said, I am. And a bush lit up. Right after I wet my pants, I'd have started stuttering. I hear God chose him. See, I can hear Moses now. God says, go to Egypt and get my kids. Moses said, I can't go. God says, I'll send your brother to do the talking. You going to Egypt. You know, and Moses went, didn't he? Succeeded, didn't he? Didn't they say one time, can anything good come out of Nazareth? It's a carpenter, man. You know. And when God tells you to go somewhere, you going. You remember Jonah? God says, go to Nineveh, Jonah. He said, I ain't going to Nineveh. Got on a boat, went the other way fast as he could. Come a great storm, they threw him overboard. Big fish swallowed him up. You remember where he spit him out? Hell, it was in Nineveh. There's a moral in that story, you know. God tells you to go to Nineveh, your ass is going to Nineveh. Now, given all these weirdos, what is so strange about God picking a bunch of drunks to help a bunch of drunks? I think that's lovely. And it does work real good, doesn't it? You know? I'm the kind of person who always believed that anything that feels good should be done to excess. I see I got some friends out there. If it feels good, overdo it. How's that way about drinking? How's that way about eating? You know, you sit down and you eat this huge meal sometimes. Say, isn't that good? And 3 hours later, you're dying, man. How's that way about sex? I remember when I found out sex felt good. I was by myself just like all of y'all were. And in spite of some dire warnings from my mother about a certain part of my anatomy going to rot off, and I was going to go blind, I figured, you know, with this keen alcoholic mind, I'll keep on till I'm nearsighted. Guess what? Sobriety feels good. Give me more. I'm the kind of person that likes to do everything at once and do it all perfectly. Psychiatrists call that obsessive compulsive disorder. I call it the Tasmanian devil syndrome. I'm like a ping pong ball, bouncing off the walls a lot of times saying, I gotta. I wake up in the morning, my mind's going 500 miles an hour already. I gotta. You know? Try to do everything at once. You ever try to pee and comb your hair at the same time? Now, women may be able to do that. I don't know. But when you're 6'3", you can't do it. And then I try to read the newspaper, too, you know. It's nuts. I didn't say I was that way. I said I am that way. I've discovered something in this program that's good for me. You know, rigorous honesty means I am what I am, and that's all that I am. That's what it means to me. And I really am what I am. I'm not perfect. I never shall be. I have a light side and I have a shadow side. And only through the acceptance of both can God do anything about either. Think about it. I'm the kind of person who's always been a great starter and a poor finisher. Had 2 basic speeds, fast forward and stop. And everything I ever went to do in my life, you know, if I really needed to do it, let's get it done. Let's get it done. In my alcoholism, when pain would strike, which was quite often full blast, man. Help me. God help me. People help me. Doctor help me. Anybody help me. And something would happen to me. I'd start feeling better. And when I'd start feeling better, I'd put it on stop and go right back and do the same thing I'd done to put the pain in me in the first place. Doesn't seem like a big problem, does it? You see people come in Alcoholics Anonymous and they want this thing and they want it real bad. Until they get their teeth fixed and get a used Cadillac and get a spiritual relationship going, and hell, they disappear. And that's a big thing. It's not a small thing. You know? If I had one enemy that was worse than failure, it was success. Every time I succeeded, something's like a little monkey jump up on my shoulder and say, hey, boy, you're doing pretty good. You know? After a while, if I listened to him long enough, he'd say, anybody can take one drink. I've always seen things in either or terms. Either it was all right or it was all wrong. Either it was the best or it was the worst. You know, I miss most of life because it lies in the middle, in between those two things. But in my own mind, if I wasn't the best at something, I was the worst. I felt like a failure when I was 5 years old. How about some of y'all? And I always believed in magic. I always wanted to be fixed. Y'all ever want to be fixed? I gave my life to Jesus so many times, I'm sure he'd turn his back and run every time he saw me coming. And I was dead sincere every time, but I wanted magic. Tap me with your magic wand. Make me well. And you know why I believed in magic? Because I was lazy. Any of y'all cop to that yet? Tell alcoholics you lazy. Lazy? I worked 90 hours last week. How much do you read in the big book? How many meetings you go to? How many people did you call? How many times did you think of another person and what you might do with them? Because I read a book one time that says my very life as an ex-problem drinker depends upon my constant thought of others and how I may help meet their needs. And he said, I didn't have time. Then you're lazy. There's no magic. Magic by definition is illusion. That's the reason I loved alcohol so much. The whole world could be falling down around me in 2 sips of that flit, man, and I was King Arthur on the throne. That was wonderful. But then what happened? There's an English poet named A.E. Housman describes it very well. He said, ale, man, ale's the stuff to drink for fellas whom it hurts to think. Look into the pewter pot and see the world as the world is not. And faith 'tis pleasant till 'tis past. The mischief is it will not last. Well, I've been to Ludlow Fair and left my necktie God knows where. Carried to my home or near pints and quarts of Ludlow beer. And then the world seemed none so bad, and I myself a sterling lad, and down in lovely muck I've lain, happy till I woke again. Think, then I saw the morning sky. Hi-ho, the tale was all a lie. The world, it was the old world yet, and I was I, and my clothes were wet, and nothing now remained to do but begin the game anew. One more time. Magic is illusion. I have a body that won't handle alcohol. Never would handle alcohol. You know? I put alcohol in this body sends me a clear and certain and instant message, and it goes like this. Get me some more of that stuff and get it now. Now, Dr. Silkworth called that the phenomenon of craving, you know, and it's a physiological compulsion. And every time I took a drink, get me another drink, my body said. Now, the scientists tell me that I have a biochemical genetic disorder having to do with the hypothalamic information control center in my brain. That when I ingest ethyl hydroxide, it's converted to acetaldehyde, which combines with dopamine in my brain and creates tetrahydroisoquinolone, and I lose control. And you know, they're probably right. But I like the AA description better. You're allergic to alcohol. I had something wrong with my mind where alcohol was concerned. You know? And the scientists say I have this narcissistic, egocentric core dominated by feelings of omnipotence, intent at all costs on maintaining its own inner integrity. And probably that's right. I like Alcoholics Anonymous better. It says you are strangely insane. And here's the difference, folks. Right there is where science stops. And Alcoholics Anonymous begins. Yeah, you got a body that won't handle alcohol. You got a mind that keeps telling you you'll figure out a way that you can. But you got a spirit that's sick. And then the most phenomenal thing they say, once the spiritual malady is overcome, then we straighten out mentally and physically. That's what it says. I didn't write that. That's what it says. What in the world is a spiritual malady? I'm an idealist and a perfectionist and a hypersensitive romantic dreamer, and I've never been satisfied with me or you or life as it was. I always wanted more. Any of y'all that way? And because of the fear that everything wouldn't go my way, I became that actor that wanted to direct the whole play. And you know, when I tried to do that, people got offended. I didn't know why. I was doing it for their own good. And a wall came up between me and them. Y'all remember the wall? And I became cut off from my brothers and my sisters, and therefore, I believe, from my God. And I was isolated and lonely and separated and totally disconnected. self-will run riot had caused me to become disconnected from that which I must not be disconnected from. Okay? That's spiritual sickness. Now, Alcoholics Anonymous is so simple. God, read the book. It's so simple. You know, it says, you want to get out of this deal? First of all, quit playing God. Next, get a new manager, new director. Next, identify the stones in that wall that you put in there. Write them down. Go talk to somebody about them. Check them for accuracy. Ask God to remove those stones out of that wall. Step through. Make amends to your brothers and sisters. Try to repair those relationships that you've damaged. And you'll reconnect. And when you reconnect, the obsession of the mind will disappear. You'll be restored to sanity. And if you're restored to sanity, you don't drink. And if you don't drink, your body doesn't cry for more alcohol. Amen. And I mean, it's just laid out in there like little red hen language. And people like me have to complicate it. You know? Ever since I could remember, I was afraid. I've come to believe there's only one fear. You know, it's like, but it's got many tentacles. You know, we go out and try to deal with our fear of this and our fear of that. That's not what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous does. It deals with fear. The mass. And it says we can outgrow it, and I believe that. You know, but as far back as I can remember, I was afraid. I didn't know what I was afraid of. But I had this sense that something was going to happen to me, and I didn't know who was going to do it, where it was going to happen, why it was going to happen, but something was going to happen to me, and it was going to be terrible. You know? The shrinks call that free-floating anxiety. The teenagers call it being wired. You know? I had a lot to be afraid about. I was the ugliest baby you ever saw. People say, how do you know that? I said, my mother told me so. Oh, I told a psychiatrist that one day. Your mother told you that? Ooh, it must have been traumatic for you. And I said, no, sir, it wasn't traumatic. I've seen my baby pictures. Mom was right. I was ugly. And as I grew up, things didn't get much better. I was one of them skinny little old boys, you know. And Mama made me wear knickers. Any of you fellas have to wear knickers when you was little? And my leg was this big and the knicker hole was this big and it was always falling down. I hated those knickers. They made out of corduroy and I swished when I walked and I didn't like that either. Now I knew my mama didn't like me when she kept putting knickers on me. I'd hide them and mislay them and burn them and do everything else. She'd go right back down to Steinberg's department store and get me another pair of knickers. Somebody said to me the other day, knickers are coming back. I said, not on my ass. And you know, I love freckles as long as they're on other people. But I had so many freckles you couldn't count them. I mean, they joined one another and multiplied. And I didn't like that, you know. And I wanted to be a macho man. And my mother had 4 big brothers, Uncle Lloyd and Uncle Cedric and Uncle Glenn and Uncle Durwood. And they were all macho men. And the most macho one was my Uncle Durwood, who they called Dud. And Dud was a motorcycle cop back in the days when they wore riding breeches and leather spats up to their knees. And he had a harness across here with silver bullets stacked in it. Pearl handle 38 sitting high on his hip. He smelled like gunpowder and shaving lotion, and he squeaked when he walked. And by God, that's macho. And on top of them freckles was a great shock of snow white hair. You know what my macho uncles called me? Puddinhead. It's hard to be macho when people call you Puddinhead. That is not a macho name. You know what I mean? But something I got to tell you, the only time I wasn't scared was when I was sitting behind my Uncle Dud on that Harley Davidson police motorcycle with my arms wrapped tightly around him. I wasn't scared of nothing. Even then, I needed a higher power. Hear what I'm saying? My Uncle Dud's one of my heroes. He's 87 years old now. He's still the most macho man I know. You know? And we need heroes in this program. I want to say this to you. We do not need idols. We do not take idols of these poor suckers we take and put on a pedestal and wait for them to make a mistake so we can destroy them. Which is the reason we put them up there in the first place. I'm talking about heroes. I'm talking about the guys and gals that get out there and do it. And they make lots of mistakes and they get up and do it again. And they have lots of successes and they get up and do it again. The main feature is heroes are always in action. And without my heroes, and I mean this, I would not be here tonight. I would not be here. I had the sweetest daddy you've ever seen in your life. He was the sweetest, kindest, gentlest, most wonderful man I have ever known. I'll never, ever achieve the goal, but one of my goals in life is to be like my daddy. My daddy didn't say he loved me a lot. Words weren't necessary. You know these kinds of people that you're around and they exude love, it just comes out all over you? That was my daddy. You know? And I used to look back on my childhood and I said, man, how terrible it was, you know? My mother who tried to relive her life through me, who demanded perfection of me, and when I was perfect, even that wasn't enough. You know? Who would tell me when I'd come home with straight A's on my report card, you can do better. You know? Okay? And I had this dad, and I used to look back on my childhood and I think, wow, it was rough. And it's a funny thing about childhood, you know. I began to see one or two things that were good. And after I saw one or two things that was good, then I saw three. Then I saw four. Then I saw five. And that wonderful thing called some balance to it came into being. Even that mother of mine, she did not know how to love in the sense of hugging somebody's neck or kissing somebody or praising somebody. When you were talking today, June, she was like, the money was there. Mama almost killed me, bailing me out of jail, picking up all my bad checks, you know. And I had her to blame for years, and yes, I hated her. Well, let me tell you something. Retrospect's a wonderful thing. My mama's dead now. God rest her soul. She's up there telling God what to do now. But if I called my mama tonight and told her, come to Reno, Nevada, Mama, I need you to die for me, my mother would present herself right here. I think we need to rethink it when we start talking about our parents, you know. I think we need to cut people a little slack. I think I need to look at the person that I would judge most harshly and know inside myself that my shadow can do exactly what that man did. That I have the capacity within me to be the worst and I have the capacity to be the best. And the only thing that can lessen the one and magnify the other is that wonderful love of God. It's the only thing. My childhood wasn't so bad. I lived in a mill town down in North Carolina, textile mill, cotton mill town, you know. And the town was neatly divided by a railroad track right down the middle of it, you know. And all the workers lived on one side in houses that were just alike. And across the tracks lived the managers and the doctors and the lawyers and the people that had some money, you know. And I never will forget my extended family. What has happened to the extended family in 1996? Everybody on that side of the street was family. We didn't have the same names. But I ate at your house. I slept at your house. If I misbehaved, I got punished at your house. And punishment was not abuse. It was sure and swift. And I mean, it was accurate. The exact words they would say to me is, boy, if you do that, I'll whip your ass. And when you did it, they whipped your ass. And then Mama always talked that Mama talk while she's whipping on me. I never did understand that. Son, remember, this hurts me worse than it hurts you. Never did understand that. I always want to say, Mama, give me that stick. I don't want you hurting like that. And I remember the people on that block, you know. The lady that lived next door, her name was Lena. She's the best cook on the block. She's the best eater on the block, too. Lena was a heavy woman, you know. And I used to love to hug Lena. Man, you go up and hug Lena, you had a breast in both ears, you know. And she'd rub me on the head and say, I love you, Puddin'. I'd just go, And there was nothing sexual about it. It was like being surrounded by fleshy, warm, real love, you know. Oh, I wish I could find her tonight. I'd do the same damn thing. And she had a son named Bill Jr. who was one of my boon companions and one of these little boys that was programmed for self-destruction. You know, he was always cut or skinned or sewed up or broken. If he's within 10 yards of your car, you didn't shut the door, his hand would be in that door. I never saw anything like it. And Bill Jr. had the most wonderful curly black hair, and he wanted to be straight like mine. And we found some lard one day and straightened out Bill Jr.'s hair. That's the happiest I ever seen that kid till the curls started popping back, you know. And he hated to bathe. If she'd turn her back, he'd escape. And she'd come out the front porch and say, Puddin', he's loose again. And there go Bill Jr.'s naked ass flying down the street in Irwin, North Carolina. And I'd chase him down toward Clay Hill, which is a big pile of red dirt the railroad brought in. Never did anything with it. And man, when it rained, we'd get box tops and go slide down Clay Hill. And you feel so good, don't you? You know why? Because that's a spiritual experience. Now take Bill Jr. home. You know, let's just think about that one. Take Bill Jr. home and hold him while his mama bathed him. My mama was a black belt Southern Baptist. You know what I mean by that? Mama get up 4:30 in the morning and give God his directions for the day. Now she called it praying, but I knew better. You know? And Sundays around my house were a hoot because Mom would put on her war clothes on Sunday. Always wore a dark blue or black dress, which made me believe God liked dark colors, you know. And she'd go in the bedroom and put on a corset, not a girdle, a corset. One of them contraptions you string up. And I'd hear my mama blow all the wind out of her body and string up that damn corset. And then she had a brassiere with hormones, and she'd string that thing up, you know, put on that black dress and come walking out, and I'd be just dying laughing. I said, Mama, what you doing that for? She couldn't move none, but her head looked like a buzzard, you know. What are you doing that for? You're a pretty woman. Here's some more mama talk, 'cause it's Sunday. Now, I was a smart kid. I figured Sunday means church, and church means God, and God does not want my mother to breathe on Sundays. That's pretty good, isn't it? And my other friends, you know, John Q. and Martha, the first little girl I ever played doctor with. I've never forgotten Martha, you know. And old man Lucas come by the house, and he had his old wooden wheelbarrow with the old wire wheel in front of it going down to slop the hogs. Y'all slop hogs out here in Nevada? And he'd call me, and I'd jump in there with that hog slop and ride down to the hog pen while he fed the pigs. I'd go over and wade in the creek and drink a little cool water and catch me some crawdads. That's next to heaven, man. And I'd walk home along that path barefoot. You know, couldn't take off your shoes before May the 1st. You got whooped if you did, but Mama wasn't there, and I had my shoes off. And feel that wind, you know, and everything was so nice. And I wasn't going nowhere, and I wasn't coming from nowhere. I was just being. I was just being. I was good at just being when I was a kid. How about y'all? You know? And I think the spiritual teachers in this world wanted us to get back to that state, evidently. They said these strange things like, you got to turn again and become like a little child. To the point where I believe that spiritual growth, as is described in this program, the 12 steps, is not a process of growing up. It's a process of growing down to be a child of God. I got a son in the program now, be 4 years sober, the 5th of next month. And when he was a little kid, you've heard of armchair philosophers. Jason was a potty chair philosopher. Kids are smart, man. He's sitting on that potty chair. Somebody had to sit there and talk to him, you know. And I was sitting there one night, and he said, Dad, why don't I be the dad for a while and you be the son? I said, well, how do we do that? He said, it's simple. He said, I'll grow up and be the father. You grow down and be the kid. Kids are smart. They're really smart, you know. I loved it in that town. I'd lay around my back on the grass. How long has it been since you did that? And look up at the sky. I do it now. People look at me and say, son, bitch is crazy. I stop my car on the highway, take off my shoes, and go walk in a freshly plowed field because I want to. And they say, look at that son, bitch, ain't he crazy? It's them that's crazy rushing up the highway at 75 miles an hour. They ain't coming from nowhere and they ain't going nowhere. But they don't know it. You know, I used to go to the movies every Saturday. It cost 9 cents to go to a movie. Man next door ran the theater, and he gave us popcorn as a nickel a box, fresh popped. Run out of popcorn, stick your box out there. And the Cowboys were my heroes. Y'all remember some of them? Hopalong Cassidy, the Durango Kid, Wild Bill Elliott. Them 2 silver guns turned backwards. You draw down on Wild Bill, he'd spin those silver guns and shoot the guns out of your hand. Cowboys was polite back then. You know, and Sunset Carson, and every once in a while Roy Rogers was okay, you know. And you see a double feature series, you know. They had some serials that came through. Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and all that good stuff. And Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. They had good cartoons, not this monster crap you see on TV now. I'm talking Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig and Wile E. Coyote, who to this day is one of my role models. Every time Wiley's rocket goes out, I say, I understand that. You know, the greatest plan. I understand that. You know, and my favorite cowboy is Lash LaRue. Y'all remember Lash? Some of you? Lash carried a bullwhip. You young folks ain't seen nothing. Watch TBS some morning about 4 a.m. You might see Lash. Now Lash carried a bullwhip. You draw down on Lash, he whipped the gun out of your hand. That was cool. Lash was the coolest cowboy I ever saw. And one movie, he'd run all the bad guys out of town. He's standing up on the roof of the saloon, and he's looking all macho like I always wanted to look, you know. And he popped his whip, and he whistled, and his horse come running by. And he popped that whip again and leapt into the saddle and rode off in the sunset, popping that whip, and tears came to my eyes. God, look at Lash. That's wonderful. And I watched him again and again and again to see him do that. And you got to emulate your heroes. So I went home, got me a piece of rope, went up on the garage. My buddy John Q had a pony named Beauty. I said, John Q, go saddle up Beauty. And he did. I said, now walk her past the garage. And he did. And I popped my rope. And when I hit it, you could have heard me scream in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I don't know if that was a spiritual experience, but I never forgot it. And 30 minutes later, when I got my breath back, I started wondering about Lash LaRue, too. And I still do, as a matter of fact. Wonder if Lash had some kind of surgery or something, you know. Maybe a sponge saddle or something like that. But I had fun when I was a kid. I didn't like me. I thought I was ugly, you know. I thought I was less than. I never felt up to anybody else, even though I excelled at everything I did. Because you see, when you don't like yourself like I didn't, it's very necessary that everybody else did accept and like me. And so I went out there and performed for people. I made straight A's in school. I sang the solos in school. I won the spelling contest. In the Baptist church, I recite more memory verses than you ever wanted to hear. And people would applaud. And I'd be saying, so what? What's next? This is not it. Because there was something missing in me, and I knew it. But I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know where to look for it, and I didn't know where to find it. Johnny H., my friend from California, says it's like having a big hole in the middle of you with the wind blowing through it, you know. Carl Jung said it's a secret unrest that gnaws at the roots of our being. An emptiness. An emptiness. And I knew if I can ever fill this hole, I'm going to be okay. And I got to tell you this. We went to Baptist church every Sunday. I was raised Southern Baptist. You can recover from that. But it takes time. And I'm sitting there this Sunday morning by my mama who can't breathe. And the choir's singing. And the preacher's giving the invitation. This tie's going too. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the nicest, warmest shower came down around me I'd ever felt in my life. You know what I mean? And the chill bumps started spreading all over me, and a warmth came upon me, and it was like being embraced by warm, fluffy, strong arms. And I thought, man, this is it. I hope this never goes away. It was gone. Real spiritual experience. I've never forgotten it. I was 9 years old. I could take you to that church, to the seat where I was sitting, because I went back there many times. Because once I had experienced that feeling, I really wanted it again. I didn't experience it again until I was 15 years old. And I drank some of the most foul-tasting stuff you ever tasted in your life, called Cream of Kentucky. Some people flinch when I tell them this. The nicest, warmest shower came down around me. The hole closed. I said, this is it. I'm never going to be without this stuff again. There's the magic. A lot of people don't think, you know. I hear people say about us alcoholics, we're out there trying to escape from life. We're running from reality. I don't know about you, but I wasn't. I was running after another one of those experiences. It was good. In June, I ran after it for 15 more years, hoping against hope it would happen again. Never did. Oh, God, I'd be that close. One more drink would do it. Into Blackout City again. By the time I was 16 and 17, I was getting locked up regularly in the Wake County jail where we lived. Okay? Every time I started drinking, I'd come to in jail. I never remember being locked up. My dad's on the board of deacons for over 50 years. My mother is hostess of the Tabernacle Baptist Church, and I'm in the Wake County jail. I didn't want to be there. All I wanted was to experience that feeling again. And I thought I could, you know. And so did you if you're an alcoholic. By the time I was 23, I'd had over 1,000 stitches taken in my face alone as a result of drinking. Okay? I'd been in a religious home for alcoholics, and I excelled there. I'd been in a psycho ward, and I excelled there. You know, alcoholics, I like control, man. And the only way to get in control is to get in there and do what the other people are doing. I went in the psycho ward, and I looked at those schizophrenics. I studied them. It wasn't long before they put me on Thorazine. And I shuffle up and down the hall 24 hours a day. Not going nowhere, not coming from nowhere. Just shuffling, you know. Psychiatrist didn't have a chance. In 2 weeks, he was telling me his problems. I was recording him. Sitting there saying, Schizophrenics got better. Manic depressives got better. I got thrown out of the psychiatric ward. Went to a religious home for alcoholics. Formed a gospel quartet down there. Called ourselves the Four Roses. True story. Went around to all over the place singing at churches to raise money for this so-called faith home. Treatment was preaching on Tuesday night, Thursday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night to local Christians who come in and look at us like goldfish in a bowl on Sunday. You know? And then they had to sing as a trio because I got drunk. And I went to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 23. I had to be in trouble. And I went in there and I reconnoitered the situation. And there was 12 steps on a placard on this side and 12 traditions on a placard on this side. And the guy up front had a blue book in front of him. And people were listening to him and he was in control. And I said, if I memorize what's over there and memorize what's over there and memorize what's in that blue book, they'll put me up front and I'll be in control. Now, I like control. Pages 60 to 62 describe me very well, you know. And I believe it says there, if I'm not mistaken, most people like to live by self-propulsion. And some of y'all say, oh, no, not me. Man, if I pull the bus of life into this room tonight, everybody in here would go for the steering wheel. You know it good as I do. And the Al-Anons would be leading us all, man. Let me drive. You know? And so I memorized it. This is sad. I could quote, and I can tonight, great portions of the book Alcoholics Anonymous to you. The freedom is, I don't have to do that anymore. But I learned in spades that this is not an intellectual program. That's the reason I say it to you. Knowing all that I knew, having it up here, the longest I ever stayed dry for the next 7 years was 89 days. All the other rest of the program was duck soup. You know, I was interested in meditation. That was all. I wanted one of those red poker chips we give over in North Carolina for 90 days, too, because I was sick of being nobody, and that made me somebody. Always after the symbol, me, and never the reality. I've been up the chip box after meetings and stole red chips. I wanted one so bad. And I took one and pasted it on the 90th day on a calendar, and I found out who the great meditators were. And they were these guys that shaved all the hair off their head and wore these orange bathrobes and folded up their legs real funny and chanted, Om, you know. And I'm too vain to shave my head. You know, couldn't find an orange bathrobe anywhere. Had to wear my old dirty terry cloth blue drinking liquor bathrobe with the cigarette burns in it. Y'all probably had one. And by this time I'd broken up my legs so many times driving into things you're not supposed to drive into that I couldn't get into lotus position. I couldn't get out of it either. But I'm an alcoholic. You got to do it right. And so I'd squat down there. It hurt. Oh God, it hurt. And I'd chant, Om. Now, I'm not putting down that tradition of meditation. It's a wonderful, time-honored tradition, okay? But as usual, as an alcoholic, I had no interest in the process. I wanted the results. And I'd seen what these monks could do. They'd lay down on beds of nails. By God, if I laid on a bed of nails, you'd watch me, wouldn't you? Damn, look at Tom. Ain't he something, laying on a bed of nails? Walking across coals. See, I was doing it all for you. God's got a terrific sense of humor. I don't know much about God. Don't have to. He knows everything about me. That's the way I look at it, you know. Understanding God's quite beyond me. I just say thank you and please like I do on Sesame Street. But I can see him up there now looking down, him and Peter. And God saying, there he is again. Peter say, who? God say, Puddinhead. Sitting down there in that nasty bathrobe. I wish he'd get rid of that thing. Waiting for a spiritual awakening. He wants a lightning bolt, you know. He wants to be knocked off a jackass like Paul was. And I'd give him a lightning bolt, but he probably wouldn't like the color. You know? And tell me, Peter, what does Om mean anyway? And the most wonderful thing and the most terrible thing happened to me that ever happened in my life. Same day, same time, same event. I came to. On the floor, where I usually was if I wasn't out in the yard. And I knew something. See, I'd met all these hateful people in Alcoholics Anonymous. These ugly ones, you know, that were profane and pointed their fingers at you and said the same thing. Talked in circles. They were stupid. You know, I knew they were stupid. Call them old timers. There's one of them in the group used to wait for me. His name was Bill C., and I called him Grumpy, and I hated his guts. He denied waiting for me. He'd wait for me. I'd come in the meeting, and he'd say, point his finger at me, say, how you doing, boy? Oh, God, I didn't like that. I'd say, I'm fine. And he'd go to cussing and back me in a corner and tell me how I was. X-ray vision these old-timers have got. Make you nervous. And he talked in circles. Boy, he'd say, you can't think your way into good living. You got to live your way into good thinking. And I'd think to myself, but I didn't say nothing because I was scared of him. Shut up, you ugly old bastard. I'm smarter than you are. And boy, how come we always run around looking for God? God ain't lost. Oh, I love that one. And I called Grumpy to help me one time, and as usual, I called too late. You know, you call when it was too late. All the liquor's gone, test patterns off TV. I said, shit, I need some help. And I called him about 3 o'clock in the morning before I could say a word. He said, boy, don't you ever call me again drunk. He said, matter of fact, don't you ever call me again. You know, if you want to get sober, you know where we meet, and don't call me to come get you. He said, you can walk. And he said, frankly, I don't care if you ever get sober. I'm a very sensitive human being. And the things I said about that man that night shouldn't have been said about a dog. And tonight, I bless him. And he's one of my major heroes. And he never changed. Okay? The last time I saw Grumpy, he was dying with bone cancer. And I walked into the room. I'd been sober 16 years. And up came the finger. And he said the following, quote, boy, you'll never make it. He believed in ego deflation at death. Y'all ever hear that? Well, when I came to on that floor that morning, you know, I was on 5 years probation. I had 2 years on the chain gang hanging over my head. I was never supposed to drive an automobile again, you know. And I knew something. You can't drink. It wasn't a head thing this time. And you can't quit. And you're going to die. And I made a profit out of Grumpy. I walked back to AA. And I'm going to tell you something now. I didn't think it would work. You see, I didn't think it would work. I had tried AA, quote, end of quote. But the way I had tried it was my way. And something really important had happened to me in the process. I had surrendered, and I didn't know it. Had I known it, I'd have screwed it up. I'd have run around and told everybody I had surrendered. I surrendered. Whoopee! You know? Let me tell you something, what I believe. I was surrendered for one reason and one reason only. When they told me what to do, I did it. And the moment an alcoholic can start following directions from anybody, he or she is at that point surrendered. And until they follow directions, they can talk about surrender till the cows come home, and I don't believe they're surrendered. And I was ripe, and I didn't know it. And I went late, and I left early. I didn't say anything to anybody. You know? But they said things to me. We're glad you're here. By this time, I hated my guts, you know, and I'd say to myself, you knew who I was, you wouldn't say that. And we need you. Oh, boy, yeah, you sure do. And we love you. Oh, God, that would shake me. Oh, my God, that scared me. Give us your phone number, they said. They didn't throw their phone numbers at me and said, call me if you want help. You know, we had in those days what they call group sponsorship. I got 6 and 8 phone calls a day from people I had just met. A car pulled up to my house every night, and I went to a meeting every single night and didn't have a driver's license the first 2 years I was sober. That's group sponsorship. Nowadays, we got a habit of giving a new person our phone number and say, call me, son, if you want any help. To hell with that. Get his and call him. Let's go back to the real thing. I started getting sober. I didn't know that either. I'd allow that up. You know? And I got to looking around, and they told me something about a sponsor. And we believe in sponsorship back in North Carolina, where I come from. You know? If you go too long without a sponsor, we'll assign you one. Okay? And I got to watching this one man in the group. I'm not going to lie to you. He wore expensive clothes. He drove an expensive car, and I kind of like that. But it was his eyes. Man had eyes that just were about to bright right out of his head. You know what I'm talking about? And my eyes were dead. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at anybody. They might see me. And I sidled up to him one night and I said, I'm Tom and I don't want to die. Will you be my sponsor? And he turned on me and pointed his finger at me and said, boy, I've heard about you. They tell me you're not just an alcoholic. They tell me you're crazy. But I'll sponsor you on one condition. I said, what's that? He said, we'll do it my way. And I don't know but one way, and it's in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. You ready to do that, son? I said, yes, sir. You hear that? Yes, sir. 10 days before, I told him to go to hell. I'd never done anything anybody else's way. Never. I'm an alcoholic, man. It's my way or none. I said, yes, sir. You ever notice how wise your sponsor seems till you ask them to be your sponsor, and then they go stupid on you immediately? Well, Harry went stupid on me immediately. He said, first thing I want you to do is go to meetings early and shake everybody's hand and ask them how they're doing. I said, I don't want to go to meetings early. I don't want to shake their hand. I don't care how they're doing. I just don't want to die. Why do I have to do that? He said, you don't ask me why, Tom. You do what I tell you to do. Now, a lot of people nowadays confuse a sponsor with a counselor. They are not the same. I have a master's degree in counseling. I hope you're impressed. I'm not. And if I told you to do the same thing, my very next question to you would be, and those of you who've been in counseling know this, how does that make you feel? My sponsor didn't seem to give a shit how it made me feel. You understand? And I don't mean to sell him short. Nobody on the face of God's earth cared more about my feelings than Harry Barrett, my sponsor, did. Nobody. But like I said in the beginning, he knew there were certain things I had to do, no matter how I felt. And he kept saying to me, son, you don't understand this program and then do it. You do it, and then you begin to understand it. And he preached at me, effort, result, effort, result, effort, result. And I went to meetings, I shook hands. I didn't miss nobody because I knew he was watching me and he'd embarrass me. That was phenomenal. I looked at the floor and mumbled. Y'all ever do that? God. And after a few weeks, I saw some ankles. And then I saw some shins, you know. Now kneecaps. And I saw some of the most wonderful hips I'd seen in a long time. And another problem began to awaken that had long been dead. And after a few more weeks, we won't even get into that. I don't have time, you know. And after a few weeks, I was looking them in the eye, and I was glad to see them. And I knew they were glad to see me too. And if I could describe the feeling, it was like the nicest, warmest shower came down around me. And I said, I'm home. Oh, God, I'm home. The first place in my life I've ever belonged. And I almost missed it. Spiritual awakening for me was not a radical, cataclysmic event. It was a series of little realizations. You know, people around me said, Tom, you're doing better. I said, I am. I didn't know it. I taught at a community college in those days, and faculty members who didn't even know I was an alcoholic, much less that I was in the program, say, what are you doing? You're so much nicer a person nowadays. We like you now. I say, you do? It was all amazing to me. And I was sitting eating my bag lunch in my office one day at the college, and all of a sudden it hit me like a sledgehammer. You haven't wanted to drink for over 3 months. Oh, God, I sat there and cried my eyes out with happiness. You know, and said, thank you, God. I knew it had something to do with the program. I knew it had something to do with my sponsor. But I didn't understand it. You know, they say God comes like a thief in the night. That's the way He came to me when I least expected it. You know, after I took the 6th and 7th step, I'm sitting in a little chapel and I'm looking at the stained glass window up behind the pulpit, and it's the carpenter, but there's no cross. And I thought in my own mind and heart, where's the cross? And it came in. It's been removed, Tom. So has yours. Bam! Oh, Lord. It started happening to me. Do you understand? And I began to learn some things. And my values began to shift. This is a program of values, folks, in case you don't know it. They began to shift from me to other people. That's astounding to me. I began to actually care about other people.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
You know, I began to change my ideas about being successful. They're changed today. I'm never going to have a lot of money. Don't need a lot of money. I don't care about that. But if I can hit my bed tonight and lay my head on the pillow and say, Tom, did you try to be kind and gentle and considerate and compassionate to everybody you met today? And I can answer yes. I am an unqualified success in the eyes of God and my own eyes. Because that's what it's all about with me today. I'm not into the profound principles. I'll sit around and talk about the 4 absolutes with you and the 4 practical spiritual activities and the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, the Oxford group, the Emmanuel group, all the rest of it, and philosophize with the best of you. But all I try to do on a daily basis is to demonstrate what God has done for me in my life by practicing the most basic principles. You know what my sponsor told me the most basic was and the most important? Son, be considerate of other people. Isn't it strange how we talk about these big concepts and then act like bastards? It's changed my idea about success. My ideas about love have changed, Like most American males, love was an emotional matter to me. It's a combination of hormones and feelings. And that's the only kind of love we seem to know about in this country. Some enchanted evening you may see a stranger across a crowded room and say to yourself, she looks like she needs a spiritual experience. And you just love her. Them hormones rise, and them feelings rise. And 6 months later, the hormones are down and the feelings are down. And you roll over and look at her and say, who's this bitch? That is not the kind of love they've taught me in this program, My sponsor said, son, you don't have to like everybody, you got to love them. That blew my mind. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, pick out the man in this room that you dislike most, and that was easy. He said, now, if he called you at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning and said, I'm about to take a drink, what would you do? I'd start to tell him to hold on, and I'd go over there. He said, then you love him. I said, I do. See? Spiritual love is quite different. Spiritual love is responsible action toward other people and toward all created things, I believe, because you regard them with respect and care and concern. It doesn't have a thing to do with feelings. Feelings come and feelings go. Think about if God's love was conditional. If God's love was based on emotion, where would we be? But I'm convinced He loved me as much when I was out there drunk as He does tonight. It's not that. And it hasn't been roses. I don't know why I ever thought that if I changed, the world would change. Is that self-centered or not? Huh? Did y'all ever think that? Well, I'm sober. Hell, bring the goodie truck to my front door. My daddy was a good one for straightening me out on stuff like that. I used to drink and read the Bible. Not dangerous, man. I used to drink and read the big book. I got whiskey glass circles on the front of my old big book. I've been reading The Prodigal Son one night, and my daddy and I were having a little argument, and I said, well, you give me what's mine and I'll get out of here. He said, you wearing it. Get your ass out the door. I remember carrying him to a meeting one night. The guy picked up a chip, and everybody applauded and everything. On the way home, Daddy says, what they applauding for? I said, well, the man's been sober 4 years. He said, I've been sober 70 years. Ain't nobody applauding for me. Daddy just laid things out real clear, And you have to think about these kinds of things. What is success, Is the world going to change because I change? Absolutely not. It's not what happens to me in this world that matters. I know that now. It's my reaction to it that makes the difference, as Chuck C. used to say. And he got it from Emmett Fox, who used to say, with a new difficulty of any kind, it's the reception I give it mentally and the attitude I take towards it in my own thought that totally determine its effect on me. My alcoholism used to be a curse. Now it's my greatest blessing. You understand? All depends on how you see things. The world doesn't change. That never was promised, huh? What was promised was that I would react differently to what happened. Because I was changed. Okay? The last 5 years of my life, it's been not good. I've had about 7 surgeries, one of them for cancer, The woman I adored with all my heart walked out on me. My mother got Alzheimer's. My sponsor got Alzheimer's. I almost went bankrupt. I felt like killing myself when my wife walked out. I adored that woman. And then my mother died. And less than 2 months later, this woman that I loved killed herself in a head-on collision. And then one of my dearest friends tried to commit suicide in less than 2 weeks. And then another dear AA friend of mine died about 2 weeks later. And less than 6 months later, the woman who was so close to me in AA, I called her my second mother and sent her a Mother's Day card every year, was found dead in her house. Okay? And I grieved. And I stomped and I screamed. And I asked God to let me die. But you know what? Not one time did I think about drinking. You hear what I'm saying? Not one time did I think about drinking. Dying, yes. Drinking, no. Why? Because this program's greatest gift. Forget all the rest. Sanity. Sanity. I've been restored to sanity. You understand what I mean? I don't have the obsession to drink anymore. I don't care what happens. My friends will say of me, he'd rather die than drink. And they're right. They're right. Who would have ever thought such a thing? Okay? And I'm happy. You know, why not? You know? And I'm not ugly anymore. I ain't pretty either, but I ain't ugly, okay? And let me tell you something. This father, you know, he adored me, man. He thought I was the greatest thing in the world. And when I was 18 years old, it took me before a judge there. And the judge says, you can either go to the chain gang or you can go to the service. And I got patriotic in a hurry. And my daddy took me down to go to the United States Air Force, whose life I was about to enrich. And while he was telling me how much he loved me, he had his hand planted firmly on my butt, pushing me up in that bus. He wanted me out of his life. I was driving him nuts. And my daddy had lung cancer. And I sat with him the last month of his life. And it's the most horrible, most beautiful experience I've ever had in my life, if you can understand that. He was in such pain the drugs wouldn't kill it. They wouldn't touch it. And he was out of his head most of the time, you know. But the times he had clarity, like the morning before he died, and he rolled over and he said, son, am I going to die? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, when? I said, the doctor says it will be soon. Does that frighten you? My dad's response, sure it does. But I learned a long time ago, son, when you're afraid, to give the fear to God and go about your business. And then he looked me dead in the eye and he said, Tommy, I love you. You're one of the finest men I've ever known in my life. Okay? Transformation. Huh? Transformation. Several people have said to me lately, the weirdest thing. They said to me, you know, you're the sweetest, kindest, gentlest man I've ever seen. You just ooze love when you hug people. I said, really? Then my son gets up at a meeting to introduce me one night. He said, I'm about to introduce you to the finest man I know. He's my hero. He's my father. Yeah. You can't cash into chips downstairs and be paid any richer than that. You know that? Even my mama told me she was proud I was her son. Took her 15 years of sobriety to do it. But she finally did it. You guys be patient. It'll come. You know? It'll come. Yeah. It was glorious when she told me that. You know? I just cried and she just cried. You know? A friend of mine in Alabama gave me a tape one time. I'm going to shut up. I've come a long way. I'm going to talk as long as I want to, but that's she gave me this tape and she said, listen to this tape. This guy in this song reminds me of you, you know? And I got to listen to the song. It's by a guy named Eddie Kilburn. And he writes top 40 hits for other people. He goes around and sings at churches for free. I kind of like that, you know? And I'm going to share this with you as if it was a dialogue between my daughters, Frances and Crystal, and my son, Jason, and my mama and me, if I can remember it, because it means an awful lot to me. My daughter, Frances, says, Daddy, why aren't you famous? And I said, Frances, I think I am. Because all the people you see here tonight came out here to give me a hand. But their applause isn't what really matters. It's what I can feel from their hearts. And if tonight I made dreamers of some who had lost them, I made friends with a few who were scared, or if there's one new believer who came here a critic, and I told him that somebody cared. And then, Francis, I always feel famous, though I'm not seen on TV. I get all the attention my ego can handle, doing this live and for free. You see, I do it live and for free. And my daughter Crystal says, but Daddy, why are you lonely? I said, Christy, I guess I am. Because there are a few people that I miss tonight who are not here to give me a hand. But you know, in some ways they're closer than the people out on the front row. And if I'm quiet, I can hear Grumpy's heart beating rhythm. See Chuck C. driving his car. And there are preachers and poets that I never met, like Bill Wilson, who hasn't gone far. So I'm alone, but I'm not really lonely. I just got a group you can't see. They give me all the companionship my faith can handle doing this talking with me, because you see, they do this talking with me. My son Jason said, "Daddy, I think you're crazy." I said, "Jason, that's what keeps me sane. I was born with a strange sense of humor to go with a strong sense of pain. And I found there's nothing so serious that it can't hold its own in a joke, so I may smile at stories about people suffering, laugh about losing my hat, make people think I give talks without answers because I tease them and hide where they're at. But I also love things that are simple. And a smile is the last thing you'll see on the face of this crazy old outlaw, laughing out loud because I'm me. I laugh like this because I'm free." And then Mama, the black belt Southern Baptist, says, "But Tommy, do you love Jesus?" And I said, "Mother, doesn't it show?" She said, "I've been listening to you for an hour, and frankly, I got to say no." Because if you did, you'd be famous, big concerts and Christian TV. You'd be so well known that you'd never get lonely, you'd never be crazy or weird, but you got to give up making talks about drinking, and you ought to shave off that old beard. I said, "Well, I love you too, Mother. But you sure found it different than me. You see, I do my best, and I do it like Jesus, because He did it live and for free." Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.